Welcome everyone to another session of TriTech University. My name is Bill Steppen, and today we are going to be wrapping up our astonishing accounting April with going over some year-end processes as well as accounting periods. Now, I believe there's something weird going on with my screen here. So let me just try and refresh that while I am talking through kind of our normal get started process. So as I said, today we're going to be going over year-end closes with General Ledger, how that works in the MSI, what that actually does as far as your MSI system is concerned. And we're basically going to be seeing what happens when you do a year-end close and what you will want to do kind of leading up to that. Before we do get started with that, we always have our little bit of housekeeping rules. So we're using GoToWebinar, and with using GoToWebinar, there's going to be a toolbar. Now that toolbar is how you interact with me during these sessions. So if at any point you have a question on the content that we're discussing, feel free to go ahead and use the questions box that's on that screen, and you'll be able to type in a question, and I'll do my best to answer those as we go through the webinar. Of course, we'll have some time at the end for a full-fledged Q&A session. If we do need the full time, which I don't think we will, it will be near the end of the hour. It'll basically be when we get to the end of everything that I have prepared for us today. Let me just do one final thing to try and calibrate the screen that I normally do here, and hopefully it won't give me any more grief. Always fun in the live world of technology. So once more with feeling here. And now everyone should be hopefully seeing my screen. There we go, perfect. All right, fun times all around. Okay, so as I said, if you have any questions, feel free to go ahead and type them into that questions box. I'll do my best to answer them. They'll be right over here. If at any point that GoToWebinar toolbar is taking up too much screen real estate on your monitor or your phone or your tablet or however you're viewing today's session, there's going to be a little orange box or a little orange button with a white arrow. Feel free to click on that, and that'll shrink that toolbar off to the side, so that way you'll be able to see the whole screen, as long as the screen is being broadcast to you. So, as I mentioned, year-end closes in MSI General Ledger. What does that mean, and what does that do for you? So, to discuss that, we're going to talk a little bit about what MSI does as far as your accounting system. As we've discussed, not only when we did the original discussion on General Ledger as a kind of an overview last month, and we did our module mechanics series, and we talked about General Ledger. But as we've been discussing all throughout this month, MSI is a real-time process. It's a real-time system. As you receive inventory, as you sell inventory, as you do anything that has a tangible, trackable value associated, MSI is going to be making automatic journal entries throughout the course of the day, again in real time, which means that you can run any ledger-related report in real time. Now, these entries build up over the course of days and weeks and months and years. And once a year, what we recommend that you do is you close out your general ledger so that you can move all of that into what's called a prior year ledger file in MSI. Now, it's not going to specifically mention that, but what that gives you the ability to do is run ledger reports, such as your income statement, with a prior year comparison. You'll never lose the data when you close out your year. It simply is being moved to a file that's not considered current ledger. It's moved into a prior ledger file. So for example, whenever you run a report such as reports and general ledger and income statement. Normally when you run this report for anything that's in your current year, such as let's say January 1st through today, that would be considered in the current ledger because we have not closed out that year. Notice how down here in the locations field, let me go ahead and grab my highlighter tool to kind of bring attention to this. See how in both of these fields it's saying there's a date there of 12/31 of 2018. So basically what that means is that that is the year-end close for these particular locations. Now you can close each location independently of each other because they do technically have separate books, even if they're sharing the same chart of account. We've discussed that in past sessions as well. So basically, that's a little reminder to you that if you run anything basically ahead of this date, it's in your current ledger. Notice how down here at the box or at the bottom of the window, there is a little checkbox that says prior year ledger. So what that means to you is if you were to do anything prior to that year-end close, let's say you did this for 1/1 of 2018. And of course, it's going to say that that's more than 12 months in the past, not a big deal. But let's say we wanted to do that for 4/30 of 18. If we were to not check mark prior year ledger, it would be looking at current year and there wouldn't be any activity. But if we check mark that it's going to be for prior year ledger, then that way it will go ahead and look at that prior year file. Now, the way that that prior year data gets into that file is through year-end closes. So that being said, any place where you can run ledger for a date range, you're going to have that option of being able to tell it whether you're running for prior year ledger or not. Same thing holds true for, let's say, for example, the list ledger by reference report. When you run that report, notice how there is, again, a little checkbox there for prior year ledger. And as long as you're basically running this for anything prior to that year-end close, you'd be wanting to make sure you check mark that prior year ledger. Now, kind of getting prepped up leading to a prior year ledger or closing your year out, you would want to first kind of tell MSI, if you've never closed a year before, you would want to tell it what the actual quote unquote last year closed was for your data. So that might be, for example, if your year end, if your prior year, let me start that sentence over here. If your fiscal year equates to a calendar year, so in other words, 1/1 is the beginning of a new fiscal year, so 12/31 would be the end of a prior year. And if you've never closed a year before in AMSI, one of the things you'll want to do is go into maintenance and general maintenance, where you have your system variables. We've kind of talked about system variables off and on throughout all of these webinars. System variables control a number of different things. And actually, I realize I'm going to the wrong spot. This is where it used to be many, many moons ago. But there is technically at a last year closeout date. It's actually going to be at the location level. So staying in maintenance and general maintenance, we're going to go to your store locations. Here at the store locations level, each location has a last year end. So if I go ahead and grab the highlighter again, you'll see the last year end field right there, seeing how that says 12/31 of 2018. Now, normally what you'll probably see when you come in here is that will probably be empty. So it'll probably just have nothing in it. So what you'd want to do is basically say that the last year end would be kind of the year prior to the one that you want to close first. Now, again, if you have been using AMSI, let's say for several years, but you've never closed out your year end, you may want to do a few things kind of leading up to this. If you've just started using AMSI, let's say, for example, you started using it as of, let's say, mid-year last year, then you would probably basically want to come in here and go ahead and put in that 12/31 of 18. Or even maybe of 17, if you have some activity in the year of 2018 that you want to close out leading up to closing out 2018 into 2019, you may want to put in 12/31 of 2017. In essence, what we're wanting to do is kind of prep your AIM-SI location to then know what to look for as far as the ledger activity. So basically, by putting in the date prior to when you want to close for the first time, it will then go ahead and say, okay, everything from 1/1 of 2018 up to then your next year end, which would then be 12/31 of 2018, is going to be considered for the year-end close. That's the idea there. Now, if your fiscal year falls on a date other than December 31st, you'll just want to adjust this accordingly. Again, this would probably be empty. So let's say, for example, if your fiscal year starts on June 1st, then you may want to come in here and put in 5/31 of 18 or 17, or again, whatever year you want to kind of lead into, if that makes sense. Now, of course, I'm not going to save any of that, but that's kind of the idea there. Now, again, I've talked a little bit about this in past, but if you have been using AIM-SI, but not necessarily using Ledger, and you're just getting started using Ledger, there's probably a lot of data in AIM-SI as far as the accounting is concerned that may or may not be accurate. So let's say, for example, you've been using it for 5 or 6 years. Now, as of this year, you want to start actually using the ledger portion. What you may want to do, first of all, making sure that everything is accurate as far as the setup of your chart and all those things. You may want to go into modules and ledger and utilities where, maintenance, ledger and utilities, where there is a delete ledger detail. You would basically delete it prior to not necessarily the first fiscal year that you want to close, but the year prior. So if, let's say, you wanted to close this as of 12/31 of 2018, you would put in 12/31 of, or technically 1/1 of 2018, and that would delete all of the ledger activity prior to 2018, so 2017 and back. And that way you could go in and you could key in beginning balance entries as of 12/31 of 17, so that you have activity into 2018 that you would then be able to close. Again, I did discuss that in a different webinar. I believe it was actually the module mechanics webinar on general ledger. So if you have not attended that, definitely check out the recording on that. There's a lot more time dedicated to it in there. But let's get back to the topic du jour. So year-end closes. Basically, what is going to happen, if you're familiar with accrual-based accounting, is any ledger accounts that are designated as income statement accounts. So in AIM-SI, that would be ledger accounts 400 and up. Remember how when we're looking at the chart of accounts in AIM-SI, the ledger accounts starting at the 400 number and then going up are all on your income statement by default. Whatever the actual balance is of these ledger accounts as of the year-end date, tabulate it all up as far as the income statement is concerned. So all of the revenue or income categories or accounts less the expense categories, those are going to, whatever the overall amount of that is, whether it's a profit or a loss, that's going to take that figure and it's going to plug it into retained earnings on your balance sheet. Then all of these ledger accounts 400 and up will have their balances basically reset to 0 as of the year-end close. Now, they're not getting that ledger activity deleted. Again, they're being moved into that prior year data file. So if you ever need to go back and actually run, let's say, an income statement or look at the ledger detail for anything in these income statement accounts, you can certainly do so with the income statement report or the ledger by reference report. Just put in those backdated years and say you're running the prior year ledger like we've already discussed. As far as the rest of the accounts, the balance sheet accounts, so basically everything not 400 and up, it's 399 and down, what will happen with their accounts is for each individual account, let's say, for example, your checking account, 1081, which very likely has a lot of activity going into it in the form of deposits, a lot of activity coming back out of it in the form of payments. Whatever the overall balance is as of your year-end date, so in our example, 12/31 of 18, you would then see a balance forward. So all the debits less all of the credits, whatever the balance is as of that date, all of that activity would again get moved into prior year ledger, and it would be replaced with one single detail line that says balance forward. And then that would be bringing that balance forward into the new fiscal year. And that's going to happen for every single ledger account in your balance sheet. So that's the general idea then. Then once you actually do a year-end close, it would then go ahead and basically update that year-end date at the location level like we just discussed. So maintenance, general, and locations that would basically go ahead and say, yep, this is now 12/31 of 2019 or whatever the year is that you're actually closing up to. So what I'm going to do, I am going to go ahead and put this 1 year prior just so that we can go ahead and actually see how this would work. So the way to do that is, you wouldn't have to do that. This is just for the purposes of my demonstration here this morning on the webinar. But prior to a year-end close, basically there's the only real thing, the only real thing that AMSI cares about is that the ledger is in balance. The debits and the credits come out to a net zero. You, on the other hand, will want to make sure that the account balances are correct as far as your CPA or your bookkeeper is concerned. Probably the best report to run for that purpose would be not only your income statements and your balance sheets, but also your detailed trial balance. So when you run your detailed trial balance, you would run it for the year that you're looking to close. So let's say it's 1/1 of 18 through 12/31 of 18 for the location, and then basically running that report and then printing that to screen, or actually printing it out to a report. Now, again, I don't have any data in there. It will let you know that it's out of balance, but basically you'd be looking at, let me grab my highlighter instead of just be pointing at the screen. You'd be looking at the overall debits and credits, and then the grand total line, which should show the debits and the credits essentially coming out to a net zero. Let me actually rerun this same report, but for the current year, because I know I do have ledger activity for that. So 1/1 through, we'll just do this of today. And then, yes, I know I didn't enter the last day of the month. Let's go ahead and look at this report. So you can see this actually has some activity now to it. The beginning period, typically if you're doing this as of a year that you've had ledger activity in the past, this would be made up of the balance forward, and then the actual debits and credit activities, and then the balances of each ledger account. And then overall at the very end, you would then have, where's my highlighter again? You'll have the debits and the credits. Now you can see that I am actually out of balance by about $135 here. So 87,178.19 is my debit activity, 87,043.19 is my credit activity. So I am overstated by debits by $135. Now, where does that actually out of balance? You would need to be doing some investigating with that. As we discussed on Wednesday, if I remember correctly, with human elements and finding potential imbalances, what you can do to try and find these is to go in and run a report in your general ledger for a ledger reference balance check. So let's go ahead and do that. So we'll do that same date range, and we'll go ahead and run this. and we'll go ahead and print this to the screen. So here we see, oh, this is actually something I was just doing today in an earlier training call where I had done $135 sale. So basically that's what we're seeing is a one-sided debit with no corresponding credit. So basically what we would need to do, I can tell you exactly where this is, and then kind of faulting myself from Wednesday as far as having a sale non-inventory category that didn't have a ledger value associated with it. So in my particular instance, what I'm going to do is I'm essentially just going to, well, I can't reverse that because it was a completed sale, but I am going to go ahead and just do a manual credit entry for a ledger account for that. So I'm going to use that same reference of 1050, the same source code of SJ for today. I'm going to go ahead and fix that by going to modules and ledger and general journal entry. Let's go ahead and close these reports out here just so that they don't interfere with anything. Again, I'm going to do today source code of SJ reference 1050. And since that was a sale of a scheduling, from what I remember, I'm going to go ahead and find my scheduling income ledger account, and I'm going to go ahead and put that in as a $135 credit. Okay, yep, that's right. This needs departments because I had set up departments. Let's go ahead and save that. Now, of course, I have to save an out of balance journal entry in order to bring it back into balance. I'm going to go ahead and override this little message that says as far as cannot save out of balance journal entry. Now, when we rerun that report, so reports, ledger, and ledger reference balance check, we'll run it for that same date range. And we'll print that to screen. And now it's finding something else, of course. Boy, what is all of that now? Oh, it's because of the goofy department thing going on. That is very interesting. Well, this has turned into quite the cluster today because of a speeded training that I did this morning. All right, so now it's probably going to see the ledger out of balance in the other direction. So let's do this. Let's go back to ledger, and I want to see if that is in fact the case. So let's go ahead and rerun that report for the detailed trial balance. We'll do 1/1 through today, and let's just see if it is in fact showing those extra credits there at the bottom. And yes, it is. So let's go ahead, and I'm going to need to delete those. Let me just reverse that journal entry. So I'm going to modules and ledger and utilities, and I'm going to do reversing ledger entries for reference 1050 here. Get those entries and then reverse them. And now let's just see if that helps me out here as far as the detailed trial balance. So again, the beginning of the year through today, all right, there we go. Run the report, and there we go. Okay, so now we can see that the ledger is in balance. Now, again, I knew exactly what that was, so I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on that. But basically what we want to see here is that the debits equal the credits. Once you know that the ledger is in balance, as far as MSI is concerned, you can go ahead and you can close out your fiscal year end. Now, before I talk about the actual year end, there are some other things that you may want to do leading up to that throughout the course of your fiscal year. And what we're going to talk about is accounting periods. Throughout the course of a year, you may want to make sure that, yes, okay, we know that our ledger is correct, our books are in balance, everything is hunky-dory. Let's make sure that nothing screws that up like I just did. So what you can do as an option is you can do what's called closing out of an accounting period. Now that does have a a system variable associated with it. But basically what you can do is you can go into modules and general ledger, and you'll notice that right above where year-end close is, there is a close accounting period. Again, this is optional. You don't have to do this. This is something that you used to have to do in way back in our DOS version. But in the close accounting period, basically the idea here is that you would go in and you would say a period to close. Let's say it's 1/1 of, let's just do it this way. Let's say it's back in 1/31 of this year. So what would actually happen, as you can see with the little description there, is it says employees that do not have security to allow posting in a closed accounting period would be unable to post transactions prior to this date. So in other words, basically anything prior to January 31st would not be allowed to be posted. So when you save that, basically what it would do is it would just go ahead and say, okay, now anything that gets backdated, it could still technically let you save the subsidiary. Remember how we talked about subsidiaries, but it would not actually save any journal entries. Now, again, this is all subject to security. So basically, if you are wanting to make sure that your books are staying as is, you can do this as far as the closing of an accounting period. Again, it's not absolutely necessary. If you're a small store and it's maybe just a handful of folks and you're just going through and making sure, yep, this is all good, you don't have to do that. You could do it as kind of a precaution, but it's not necessary. So now essentially going forward then, once you're sure that everything is good as far as your books are concerned, you would then be prepping to do a year-end close. Now when you do a year-end close, you would want to make sure that it's at a period where only you as the year-end closer are in the system. So maybe at the end of a business day, or coming in early prior to the start of business or on an off day or anything like that. But you would then go to modules and ledger, and you would go to year-end close. And when you go to the year-end close, basically what it will ask you is the location that you want to close, the year-end date that you want to close it for. So we'll go ahead and we'll do December of 2018. And then you would check mark that you are agreeing to the following, that you have a current working backup and that you have read and understood the documentation for this program. Now the documentation to which it is referring is a year-end close document available on our member portal. It's basically just putting into a document everything that I'm describing right now. And then you would go ahead and you would proceed with that. And then basically what would happen is it would do its work and then it would come up and say year has been closed successfully. Now this is very important. This is probably the most important part of this whole process. Make sure that you do in fact have that backup and that it is working, because it's going to take your system a lot longer to close than it took my system. Basically, it was instantaneous because I don't have any ledger activity prior to 12/31 of 18. It's already actually all been closed out. But what should, basically what that's doing, like I said, it's going through the current year ledger and it's tabulating that, making the appropriate entries for the retained earnings, all the balance forwards. And then it's moving all of that actual ledger detail from the current year ledger to the prior year ledger. If something should interfere with the computer's ability to do that, such as a power surge or a power outage or a disconnect from your workstation computer to the server computer or anything like that, if something should interfere with that, the best way to get back to square one is to restore that backup, because it's going to be nigh impossible for anyone here at TriTech or anyone there at your facility to figure out exactly where in the course of all those potentially millions of entries it got interrupted. Now in AMSI version 12, the backup process is underneath admin and utilities. there's a database backup routine that you can run, and then should you need to restore it, you can go right above to the option for restore database backup. So the way that works is you run a backup, you basically say it's going to take some time, go ahead and say okay to that. It'll go through and make its backup. Now again, my system's going to go very fast because it doesn't have a whole lot of data to it, but it'll say the backup is successful. And then where that backup gets stored is in a data folder on your computer server, on your server computer. So just as a brief explanation to where you could potentially find that, in Windows File Explorer, if you go to your server computer, now my computer is just standalone, so it'd be on my local C drive, into the C drive, into a program files folder. Now your mileage may vary on your particular computer, but there would usually be a SQL Server folder, such as Microsoft SQL Server, and then there would usually be something that designates AIM-SI within there, and then an MS SQL folder from there, and then a backup folder. So this is where the backup that we just did is going to be located. And what I would recommend is make a quick shortcut to this folder. So if you come back one folder, you can right click on that and you can say send to desktop and create shortcut, and basically that would then put a little shortcut on your desktop computer or your Windows desktop right to this folder, make it a lot easier to find. If you need to restore that backup, then back in AIM-SI, so switching back over to there, again going to the admin and utilities menu, you would then go to the restore database backup. You would point it to that backup file and you would put in your individual SQL username and password. Your IT person should have that. If you had us install the program for you, we would have notated it during your initial install, so hopefully you've got that in your notes. There are things that we here at TriTech can do to try and help you find that, but overall, your username and password should be pretty unique to your installation. But basically, by putting in the backup file, putting in that username and password, that'll go ahead and restore it back to where you had left off, should you need to. Now, again, hopefully that's not going to be a problem, but computers being as sensitive as they are to things like power fluctuations, if you've got a thunderstorm in the area when you're doing it, maybe hold off on doing a year-end close for the day. A good way to try and circumvent that is to have your computers, especially your server, on a battery backup, or what's known as an uninterrupted power supply, or UPS. That way, should the power happen to go out during anything critical or even just throughout the day, the server will not immediately shut down. It'll get that battery will usually give you at least a few minutes to go in and try and shut down the process normally, so that you can close out of AIM-SI prior to the battery itself giving out on the battery backup. In most days and ages now, battery backups are usually pretty good. They're usually going to give you an ample amount of time. You just want to make sure that everything relating to your computer network is on a battery backup as well. So that would include things like routers and switches and things that generally have electricity to operate. Getting back to the year-end close, then you would know that it's successful if it comes up and says that it's successful. And then if you go into maintenance and general and look at your locations, the location for which you closed it will then have its last year-end updated. And again, basically what it would then have done is move all of that ledger detail into the prior year ledger. Now, quite honestly, that's basically it, again, as far as AIM-SI is concerned. Now, should you come to realize that something has happened where after you closed out the year, something actually was off, again, I would try and make sure everything is correct prior to doing it, probably a year end, but you can still technically backdate journal entries and activity into a year end that has already been closed, what would then happen is into the next year end, it would basically grab all of that prior year current ledger and include it into the next year end close. Again, I would try and make sure everything is correct prior to that, but just to let you know that AMSI does try and look out for those things if necessary. That is basically it as far as today's content with year-end close and accounting periods. And that basically wraps up our month for accounting as far as my webinar schedule here. So now looking forward again, as I've discussed a few times here leading into next month, we're going to be looking at potentially webinars on Friday, May 10th. So starting off the month of May, with that Friday session. I'll be out of the office on Monday, May 6th and Wednesday, May 8th. So we're looking at a webinar on May 10th, Friday, May 10th, and then the usual schedule 2 weeks after that, starting with Monday, May 20th, Wednesday, May 22nd, and Friday, May 24th. We're going to be doing a webinar on the Custom Report Designer, and again, I know a lot of folks have been looking forward to that. We'll be looking at some ways of automating system processes, automated things like reports and backups within version 12, and at least one or two other topics that people either mention to me or that I can do to help everyone out with AMSI version 12. If there are any questions on general ledger, year-end, accounting periods, definitely let me know in that questions box. If you need to reach out to me directly for anything else that I can help out with, you can email me at training, TRAINING, at technology4retailers.com. You can check out our repository of V12 webinars in the email that you'll get. There will be a link to that. And also starting today, you should now be seeing a link to a survey, which we're asking you to fill out. Just take a moment or two to fill out after this session is over. We just want to make sure that you're getting the best bang for these webinars. So it'll just ask a few questions, and feel free to fill that out. We greatly appreciate it. As always, we want to make sure that we as a company are providing the best possible products and services so that you can focus on growing your business. With that being said, let's go ahead and sign off for today and for the month of April. Again, my name's Bill Steppen, and it's a pleasure helping everyone out. I hope you all go ahead and make it a great day.